I want to start off the class with some kind of, I think it's important before we start learning to try to have like Rav Baruch Shalom always did, have a kind of an overarching explanation of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so I want to try to explain, every week I say the same thing, and I just try to think of a new way of saying it, and a way of saying it in a way that's more simple and more accessible. And so I just want to try to explain before we jump into the book why what we're doing here is directly connected to the war that Israel is facing, and how what we're doing here is completely and directly attached to every problem that we have in ourselves, within our close relationships with people, within our communities, within our countries, within the entire globe. Every single problem, according to Kabbalah, can be whittled down. The first principles, the most fundamental problem is our egos, is that we are disjointed from each other. We are disconnected from each other. And the study of Kabbalah, which is just another language within the Torah, the entire Torah is saying the same thing in many different languages, 5 primary languages. There are 5 primary ways of explaining the Torah, and Sod, the most inner aspect, is called Kabbalah, and that's what we're studying, but it's all the same, one single message that's being conveyed throughout the entire Torah, and that is, how do we unify above our differences and come together in peace and love, and thereby reveal God, and why God made the world that way, that we have to go through all of these stages in order to get there. So that's what we're doing. And so one thing that I thought about saying is that the religious community in Israel has, sometimes a rough relationship with the government, with the rest of with the larger Israeli society. And so I'd like to, as we start to learn, I'd like to make the point that according to the people who are sitting and learning and who are not going to the army, they at the core have a belief that the spiritual work that they're doing by sitting and studying Torah is in fact in partnership with the soldiers, and that these are 2 parts of the same goal, is to defend the nation of Israel. And so there is a material battle that we see manifest in front of our eyes, and those are all the battles that we have in life, with our friends, with our families, with our communities, and with other people, and with God, unfortunately with people who are very, very opposed to us, that all these battles are being manifest on the material plane of existence, but that they have a root in the spiritual mission of humanity. And so the people who are sitting and learning in Israel, in these yeshivot, their goal is to undertake the spiritual battle and to do what we're doing here. And so everybody who's taking this class and all the classes here at Alshech, and all the people who are studying Torah and connecting to Israel and working towards supporting Israel are partners in this battle. And so that when we see that, hopefully we can find a way to embrace people who we sometimes feel are opposite us or different than us, and that's literally the study of Kabbalah. That's what we're doing, okay? So into the book we go. We are learning from this book, which is called The Inner Work, and it is a compilation of excerpts from the introductory articles of the Bala Sulam, Rav Yehuda Ashlag, who is a master Kabbalist who did a Perush on the Zohar, the Book of Radiance, the preeminent work of Kabbalah, which explains the Torah on its most inner spiritual aspect. Here we go. Divine names and Sefirot all describe levels of experiencing God and what to do in order to merit these levels of divine experience. Let me read it again. Divine names and Sefirot all describe levels of experiencing God and what to do in order to merit these levels of divine experience. Imagine that somebody was learning about race cars in a book, and they had a book, and then they didn't realize that they weren't racing cars. They thought that the experience of driving race cars was reading this book about race cars. Now, reading a book about race cars is a very could be very enjoyable and very enlightening and very, very, you can learn a lot. But if a person doesn't understand that that is not the race car, if you're reading a book about mountain climbing, about this great adventure that people went on up to the top of some great mountain, and you don't realize that there is actually a mountain, then there's a problem. And so this is one of the issues that we have. We call it the galut, the exile. When we read names of God in our books, we have these very Kabbalistic prayer books where we go through all these names of God, right? We're going through all these different, and people spend a lot of time, some very holy people, very, very serious people, they reading all the names of God. So here the Baal HaSulam is telling you something that is a aha moment, something that has to happen to a person. Somebody has to awaken to this point that all the names that are in those books and all of those levels, the names of the Sephirot, of all of these worlds of consciousness are experiential, meaning that we have to have those revelations within ourselves. So imagine me and Shlomo go on a hike. And I've heard many times that Shlomo's an expert hiker. But to me, he just looks like a regular guy. I don't really know that he's such a, and people say he's a lifesaver. Shlomo is a lifesaver. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I can hear many stories about how there was this hike and that hike. But to me, he seems like a very regular person. Until I experience, let's say I go on the hike and I trip and I fall into a ravine and all of a sudden Shlomo goes on a rope and he goes down this thing and he pulls me out. Until that happens, until I have an experience where I experience the name that people have been giving to this guy who's a master, it doesn't mean anything. It's a religious experience. But we're not trying to have a religious experience. We're trying to have a spiritual experience. We're not trying to to read the stories in the Torah, in the exile, in the galut. We are trying to go into Mashiach consciousness and awaken and see. And so we were going to see the unity and see the transcendence. What does it mean, transcendence? It means that I am going to somehow see that even though I am an Ashkenaz person and this guy's a Sephardi person, I'm from Europe and this guy's from Iraq, somehow magically we're all going to be able to come together and rise above our differences and come together in a unity. And when that happens, that will be an experience of godliness. So this is a shift that has to take place. And so so this is really, until a person starts to trust themselves and go on the journey. We go to, we go to all these rabbis and we live in these Jewish communities and we read all these things about Moshe Rabbeinu. But until a person starts to try to see where the Moses inside is, where that person is, and where the Haman is inside of themselves, where is Esav and where is Yaakov within inside of me, and start to realize that that is what we're doing. And that if I can unify, if I can come to peace between the part in me that is selfish and the part of me that is altruistic, and make peace between those two things, those are the spheros. This Therefor is the beauty, the unity that comes from taking two opposites and putting them together. And so it's very nice to constantly hear stories about Yaakov Avinu. But until a person finds the power, the essence of Yaakov Avinu inside of themselves, and connects with that power and says, I am going to come, I have a friend and he's conservative and I'm liberal and we can't get along, until a person finds that power to transcend the differences and somehow say, this person is holding on to some piece of the truth and I'm holding on to some piece of the truth. And probably, 30% of what I think is true is probably wrong, and 30% of what this guy says is true is wrong, and we don't really know exactly where the balance between us is. That's the work of trying. That's the spheros. That's the tree of life. Trying to say, so let's say you have two parents at home, right? One of them is very strict, and one of them is very lenient. But if you have a loving household, it says in the Gemara that love covers over everything. So what would that mean? That if the child sees that love is the most important quality in the home, then they're able to take maybe a little bit more of the strictness from the mother and maybe a little bit more of the leniency from the father, and somehow come to a beautiful balance, right? If you come to a house, you say, go ask mommy, go ask daddy. What's happening there is the father says, I want to make sure that I'm not being too lenient here, so go ask mommy. She sometimes is a little bit more clear-headed about whether or not this is a good idea, right? And so you see that the love that the family has created a unity has transcended these differences. Now that's what we're talking about, and that's what all the stories in the Torah are talking about, and that's what all the things in Gemara are talking about. And a person has to be respectful of other people's journey, meaning, how much of this work a person wants to manifest in their exterior and how much they want to spend, how much time they want to spend internally. And that's not our business to judge other people. But if you are a person who's sitting here and you're listening to this class, then there's probably a very strong chance that you've had some kind of an awakening and you feel that this is maybe the language that we're talking here is more understandable for you, or more understandable for you to understand what we're trying to have happen in Torah Judaism. Okay? Let's keep moving. Questions? No? Making sense? Okay, very good. Okay, the Baal HaSulam writes that every facet of Judaism is comprised of two contradictory aspects. This is because we are made of body and soul. Therefore, every aspect of spiritual work contains two opposites. If we do not find two opposing aspects in our spiritual work, it is a sign that we are not going in the true way. Let me read it again without stumbling. The Baal HaSulam writes that every facet of Judaism is comprised of two contradictory aspects. This is because we are made of body and soul. Therefore, every aspect of spiritual work contains two opposites. If we do not find two opposite aspects in our spiritual work, it is a sign that we are not going in the true way. Okay? Amazing. This is exactly what was just said in the introduction. So the Baal Shem Tov says you can't ride a horse with one rein. If you want to get on a horse and the horse only wants to go left, you're going to end up back where you started. We need to awaken our most conservative value position within ourselves, and then we have to awaken our most liberal feeling inside of ourselves. And so let's say you have a home and you say, listen, I'm on my most forgiving day, I'm going to let my kids, do A, B, and C, but I'm never ever going to say it's okay for them to do D or E or F. There's just no way. There's no way that my kid's going to come home and say, by the way, I want to try cocaine, and I'm going to say, fine, let's go for that. No, it's never going to happen. But if my kid says, listen, I want to go to school, the other kids are wearing sandals, and I know we're supposed to be wearing shoes and socks, but can I go with just sandals to school? And, in Israel, the kids wear sandals, and for an American to go to synagogue on Shabbat and see somebody with with sandals with no socks on is like, whoa, that's very casual dress. But if a kid comes home, you make aliyah, you move to Israel, and your kid comes to you and says, can I wear sandals? The other kids are wearing sandals. You say, yeah, okay. So you've staked out your most liberal position, and then you stake out your most conservative position, meaning if my kid does the most horrific thing, I'm gonna give him a smack on the cheek, but I'm never ever going to, God forbid, hit him, take a stick to him, or something like that. So this is, once we find these two positions, the Gevura and the Chesed, once we find those two positions, the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says you have to aim at the goal. And Rav Nachman says life is a narrow bridge. This is what they're talking about. They're saying that you find your right, you find your left, and then you aim towards the center, and you try to have a balance, beauty between these two positions. That's what the tree of life looks like. You have all of these oppositional forces, and it's your job to find for yourself, within your family, within your community, right? Where the balance is. And so the way we do that is by not making they talk in politics about a big tent. Don't make your tent so big that you can't agree with people, that you have in your tent somebody who wants you dead. That's not politics anymore, right? That's war. So what we do is we try to have hey, I have a synagogue, and I have somebody in my synagogue who's, a little bit too religious for me. He's a little bit too, strict with everything. And then I have another guy in my synagogue who's a little bit too, he's a little bit too liberal, and he's a little bit too, he's always saying yes to everything, right? But both of these guys are still in my camp. They're both part of I would go to war for both of these guys. But there's a guy who's outside of this, in another synagogue down the block. The whole entire group is they're too religious. They wear black, and they wear, it's way too much for me. And then you have another synagogue down the block that they're just way too liberal. They just let anybody, right? So we have to find within ourselves, this is very, very important. This is how the beauty of Judaism is, that we have to work within the smaller and smaller and smaller groups. There's a famous, I'm not sure who said it, it's a famous quote, maybe everybody said it, I used to try to change the world, and then I grew up a little bit, and then I tried to save, just my country, and then I grew up even more, and I said I'd just try to change my family, and now I just try to change myself. And so what we do is, as we become more and more and more modest and humble in the enormity of this task, we start to become more and more, a little bit more and more modest in what we think we can achieve. They said that, tell a beautiful story about a Kabbalist in Europe, where he came into synagogue and his inner circle of Talmidim, his students were there, and his face was shining. So they had an awareness that their Rebbe had a huge aliyah, that he had a spiritual revelation, and he had gone to a higher level of spirituality. So in the Jewish stories, they always have some schnook, some guy who always asks the rabbis the inappropriate question. And so somebody said to the rabbi, "Oh, we see that you had this huge enlightenment. What's the difference between you today and you yesterday?" And so the rabbi turned to them and he said, "When I used to pray yesterday, I used to ask God to give me one word of truth when I pray. In other words, that my words should match my heart. That when I say I love everybody, I should really mean it. So I used to ask for one word of truth when I prayed to God. That when it says in the book, I believe that you are perfect, that I should truly believe that, right? So I used to ask for one word, that when I read one word, I say, I'm completely in line. My inner truth is completely in line with this word." And so he says, "Now I ask for one letter." He says so there's a paradox. So this is the Baal Shalom is saying, is that we have to work with paradoxes, right? So one of the paradoxes is that the better we get, the more we see our corruption. Right? We said this many times. We said that in the Talmud, the Baal Shalom, he quotes in all of his Hakdamot, in all of his introductory articles, he always quotes from the Talmud, not from the Zohar, not from the Kabbalistic texts. He quotes from the Talmud, from the revealed Torah, and he says that there's somewhere in the Gemara it says the reward for lifting 5 pounds is 10 pounds. And so when you do spiritual work, the more you try to become good, the more God shows you what's wrong with you. And so you would think that that's a bad thing, but no, it's actually a good thing. The recognition of evil when you're doing spiritual work is very good. You want to be judged. You want to look inside and you say, yesterday I was, used to make fun of people, today I don't. And tomorrow I'd like to only say things that are positive to people. So it's okay to see what's wrong with you if you intend to fix it. If you don't intend to fix it, it's better to just kind of like chill out and stay calm and, behave. Okay. Moving on. Free will is one of the most contentious topics in science. All you have to do is go listen to the quantum physicists, and certainly the theologians, and certainly the philosophers, and the camp is split between whether or not there's free will. That are we just going through some kind of robotic program, and we have our genetics, and that's what we have. Or is there some place of free will, or is it just the illusion of free will? So here the Baal Sulam, I'll read it twice. Everything that happens until now was done by God. From this moment on, I have the ability to choose between good and bad. Everything that happened until now was done by God. From this moment on, I have the ability to choose between good and bad. So here the Baal Sulam is telling you a trick. We live in a very complex construct here. This program that we live in is very complicated. It's beyond our ability to truly understand what's going on. So how does a person wrestle between, well, if God knows everything and God is the only thing that's really acting in the only experience in the universe that has the only agency in the universe is God, then what does it matter what I do? God made me, and I'm just what I am, and I don't understand anything, and so who cares what I do? There's no real free will, or am I responsible for something? And so the Rambam says there's 13 principles of faith, and one of them is that we have to believe in free will. So I would argue that proves that there is an illusion that there is no free will. In other words, if you looked scientifically at our existence, you would come to the conclusion that there is no free will. That's why the Rambam is telling you we have to believe in free will. The Rambam doesn't say you have to believe in pizza because you see pizza and you believe pizza. You don't have to believe pizza. You're eating it. You know, you have this sensation that pizza exists. But with free will, it's something that you have to believe in. So it's very hard to believe that we have agency if God is doing everything. And so here the Baal HaSulam is telling you a good rule of thumb. Everything that happened up until this point was God. God is responsible for everything that happened before. I didn't get up on the right time yesterday because I am lazy, and God did that. There's no free will. God did it. But everything moving forward is my choice.
The problem is that yesterday it was my free choice, and now you're saying it was God.
Exactly. So this is why we have to realize the complexity of the universe. We have the quantum level, which people are still trying to figure out, which breaks the rules of physicality. And so what we have is a ladder of consciousness, and as we climb this ladder, we are going into higher and higher states of unity above the material plane, above time and space. So if let's say we have 10 rungs on this ladder. Each time you climb a rung, you are elevating yourself above materialism and above time and space. So let me give you a perfect example. If I want to eat pizza, I have to eat it now. I can't go back and eat pizza yesterday, right? This is what you're saying. I'm stuck on the material plane. But if I want to write a poem about how delicious pizza is and talk about how eating pizza yesterday was so wonderful, I can do that. So in my mind, I can think about yesterday and have agency over yesterday in a way that I can't do in physicality. So we know that in Torah and Hasidus we talk about thoughts, speech, and action. We have these three levels, right? So you see that my mind is less tethered to time and space than my actions are, right? And so even higher than my mind is I can have my heart. I can actually derive pleasure from an experience that you and I had yesterday. I can relive it in my heart, in my mind's eye and in my heart. So you see that my heart is less tethered to physicality than my hands are. This is how the world truly works. This is that we have these worlds of consciousness, and the higher we get, the less tethered we are to time and space. And then we have Hasidut, the Kabbalistic interpretation of Chabad Hasidus, which explains that then we need to reinvigorate the material level. In other words, once we can escape our materialism, then we need to bring that ability, meaning my heart and my mind, back into the physical plane of existence and reinvigorate it with the spiritual and the emotional and the mental powers that I have. And that's exactly what we do, right? You use your brain and your heart to affect change on the material plane. So this is what we're doing here. We're playing around with all of these states of consciousness and trying to unify them in a singular goal, which is to come together in peace and love with all of humanity, and thereby make a place for God to express Himself through us. That's what we're studying here. Okay. Making sense, or are we going too far down the rabbit hole? I think maybe, do we need to smoke some weed? Is that what we need to do? Because we're getting very, very, yeah, okay. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to start reading because I don't know what we did last time. Here we go. Our main spiritual work is in the realm of thought, speech, and action. If we work on ourselves to think, speak, and act as though we were in the presence of God, then God helps us to feel the presence of God. Our main spiritual work is in the realm of thought, speech, and action. If we work on ourselves to think, speak, and act as though we were in the presence of God, then God helps us to feel the presence of God. Okay, this is something that is very, very, I find, to be a very difficult aspect of the Kabbalistic work, of the spiritual work. In life, we usually try to pick people who we trust, who exhibit characteristics that we can see. So if I come into a place of business, place of work, I want to find somebody who is trustworthy and I want to find somebody who works as hard as I do, right? I don't want to be taken advantage of, and so I look for those qualities. But in spirituality, something is much more it's a much harder game. God is not like this person who's sitting on a cloud somewhere that we're going to get to. God is inside of us, and we have to awaken the godly aspects of ourselves. And so what we have to do is we have to believe in God for God to act in the way that we want God to act. We have to believe that God is going to be kind, and then we see God's kindness. And so it's in other words, we have to be the bigger person in the spiritual work. First, we have to act as if we believe. So this is something that, let's say you were a counselor with teenagers, and you had a teenager who was very untrustworthy. Obviously, you would need an environment that's safe, and you would need to have enough authority. But if you were a sophisticated counselor, you would treat this kid as if they were trustworthy. You call them over. You say, "Hey, I have something I want you to take care of for me. I want you to be in charge of something." So what you do is you start to treat the person like you want him to behave. And so, for reasons that we'll have to discover over and over again, doing the spiritual work, we have to. So you see, somebody says, "I don't see God, so I don't trust in God. I don't believe in God." Right? I don't see Him. And therefore, why would I be stupid enough to believe in something that I don't see, right? This is what you get from a secular person. But in Torah Judaism, the world, we have to understand that God wants us to achieve things on our own because He wants to give us credit for those things, because He wants us to have a sense of purpose and a sense of that we've earned our status. And so that's why we said it many times, that the word for world in Hebrew is olam, and the word hidden is if you play around with the vowels, the word for hidden is the same as the word for world. And so the world is a creation where God hid Himself. So God removed Himself from our conscious awareness so that we can build ourselves up on and feel as if we're making the effort ourselves. If you had somebody around who always knew more than you and always was better than you, like an older brother or sister, at some point you become very frustrated that you never get to do something on your own. So this is the problem with the world of Ein Sof, where we completely nullified to God's greatness and God's giving, and we just keep being, awash with pleasure and God's and awareness of how beautiful and wonderful everything is. The problem with that is that if we don't earn it, then we feel somehow, it's called bread of shame in Kabbalah. We feel that we are getting something for free, and after a while, that becomes very annoying and it becomes something that's hard to enjoy. So one of God's reasons for creating the world the way He did is so that we can earn everything, so that we can feel that when we have a relationship with God, we come to the table with enough of our own that we did enough of the work and that we have ownership over what's going on, that we can have a true relationship with God. If we come to God and God has everything and we have nothing, then the relationship, as you know, if you go to somebody who has all the money and you have none of the money, then every choice that's being made is not really a choice. It's a choice that you're agreeing to whatever this guy says because he has the money and you don't. And so if you go to somebody and he has the car and he says to you, "Where do you want to go?" And you say, "I want to go to here." What he's really saying is, "We'll go where I want to go, but you can, I want to hear from you, but it's not your car." And so at some point we both realize that at the bottom line, at the end of the day, the guy who owns the car is the one who's going to make has the right to make the decision, the power. God doesn't want that for us. God wants us to come to the table, come to the relationship, ultimately, where we feel that we are. It's called a prince sitting at the king's table. So the gift that God wants to give us is so tremendous, is so unbelievably altruistic, right? So that's how our parents behave. They said, "Not enough that we're giving you all the food and free room and board. We want you to grow up and actually have your own house and be able to invite your parents to your house and give them a meal. This is what your parents want for you because they truly love you. They don't want you to just be beholden to them indefinitely, that would not be a very pleasurable experience for the child. Okay? It's very interesting that study Kabbalah can be very, very complicated, and people can avoid spelling it out. That's why the Baal Shem is so amazing, because he tells you exactly what we're talking about. But the more you learn Kabbalah, the more you realize that this is really just the story of our lives. This is really just the actual blueprint of what we all feel all the time. So here we go. When we are involved in introspection and are critical of where we are holding spiritually, but nevertheless we are happy with the spiritual connection that we do have, this happiness transcends the understanding and is true happiness. The happiness of a person who is not involved in introspection and who seeks and sees no lack within, this is happiness of little kids. Okay, amazing, okay? When we are involved in introspection and are critical of where we are holding spiritually, but nonetheless we are happy with the spiritual connection that we have, this happiness transcends understanding and is true happiness. The happiness of a person who is not involved in introspection and who sees no lack within, this is the happiness of little kids. This is exactly what we just said, right? So if you're not trying to better yourself and not trying to become an independent person who can trust themselves, and you're just happy with the fact that you have some fun stuff, then that's very childlike. But there's a grown-up way of being happy, and that's when you can trust yourself and you can trust the people around you, and you feel, I want to get better, but I still, I see what's wrong with me, but I'm still confident that I'm going to move forward, and that I'm going to, that I can trust the plan, and I can trust myself, right? That's the real true happiness. They tell, the Lubavitch Rebbe says that to be a Jew has to be comfortable, has to be able to deal with paradoxes, to have two opposing feelings. So on the one hand, you feel, I'm not good enough, I'm not where I want to be, but on the other hand, I feel that where I am is a very good place to continue the work. And within those two places, right, so remember we talked about that if you're working spiritually, you always should have two oppositional forces, right? You should have a feeling, hey, I need to really be better than I am. I need to get out of where I am to really find the true unity and the true love. I have to continually work towards that place. But on the other hand, whatever my deficiencies are now, God gave me them so that I can transcend them and I can work on them. And I have to find an ability, right? I have to be happy with where I am. And so the way that we get to that place is by feeling that we are actively engaging the work. That is the way that we can feel good about it. If you feel that you are actively pursuing the goal of creation, then you say, okay, I know where I want to get to, but I'm also very happy where I am because it gives me the opportunity to fix something. I say the Baal Sulam, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, when he would find something wrong inside of himself, something bad, a bad quality, he would be exceedingly happy about it. This is a person who was very, very corrected already. Very few things you could find wrong with his character because he had done so much spiritual work. But when he did find something that he said was lacking, that made him happy, not sad. It's imagine you made $1 million and you owned every store in the town and every dollar was going to you, and then you found out that there was another town down the road where you could open up more stores. You'd be very happy about the fact that you are lacking the new stores because it gives you an opportunity to grow. And that's what we're talking about. So we have to be able to work at two different oppositional forces, and we do this all the time. We have a macro and a micro agenda. So we have to have these two things at the same time, be able to work within these two spaces. Always, we should always, like the Baal Shem said earlier, that we should always be looking for feeling these oppositional forces within us. And if we feel too much one way, you have people who are conservative and all they want to do is argue with liberals all day. You have people who are liberals and all they want to do is they get up in the morning, and so this is what we call being a house plant. They just want to stay where they are and they lean a little bit over towards the light, but they're not really looking to take a step. And so we want to be, the first level is rocks. There's 4 levels of creation. Inanimate, rocks that don't do anything. The light falls on them during the day, and at night, the light doesn't fall on them. And then you have plants who are stuck where they are, but they can lean towards the light. And then we have the next level of the animal level. And the animal level says, I can go to the water, and I can go to the shade, and I can go to the sun. I can move around. That's a very nice level, right? But we are the level of Adam, the level of the creative level, the speaking level, it's called in Kabbalah. And that level is a creative level. What does that mean? It means I'm going to invent a light bulb that gives off light all the time, whenever I want it, right? So that's a whole nother level higher than an animal. An animal is never going to be able to do that. An animal can go into the light, but it can't create light. We can create light. And so that's what we're aiming towards, is the creative level. Right? And that's what our mission is to become creators, to create goodness. That's what God wants from us. He wants to be able to create goodness. He doesn't want us to not just be recipients of goodness. Okay, very good. When one reaches the spiritual state of being within the palace of God, or more accurately, when the palace of God is within oneself, one then sees all the other souls that have attained the palace of God. Okay, this is huge, okay? When one reaches the spiritual state of being within the palace of God, or more accurately, when the palace of God is within oneself, one sees all the other souls that have attained the palace of God, okay? People say constantly that they want Mashiach, and I was talking to my friend who is a Hollywood writer, and he's a mentor. He went to Yale University. He's one of my favorite people. He's a very brilliant person. In the secular world, he knows of just about anything you want to. You say Hegel, he knows what Hegel said. You say Shakespeare, he knows what Shakespeare said. He's a very bright, educated person, and he's Jewish. And we have many, many conversations, hour-long conversations about the dichotomy between the spiritual, the religious experience and the secular experience, and people, we said we had this conversation this week, and he was saying how religious people and secular people are saying kind of the same thing, but in a different way. Everybody's saying they want the world to be a better place, and people are speaking differently. So we're saying Mashiach should come, and they're saying we should invent something that ends starvation. So people are kind of in the same ballpark, but they're describing things from a different vantage point. And so people think, oh, I want Mashiach to come. I want the Messiah to come so he can do something for us and make something happen. But really, the best he's going to be able to do is explain to us what we need to do inside of ourselves to reveal the purpose of creation, this unity that they're talking about. It has to happen within each of us. So we know that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the Beis Hamikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, the two temples, these are manifestations on the material plane that exist within us. And the Merkava, the chariot, we speak about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that there's a chariot that connects us, that takes us to God. This is what we're talking about. This is the sphera. The spheros is just another language for explaining what's going to happen inside of us, that's going to awaken in us and to reveal inside of us that we're all one soul, and that we all should love each other, and we should all care more about giving than taking, right? This is there's only one thing here that we're talking about. It's all just different ways of expressing the same thing. And so we meet Kabbalists, we meet these holy people, and they seem to know the future, or they have these insights. How do they know? They say something to you about your personal life. How could they possibly know these things? And so what the Bala Sulam is explaining in the language of Kabbalah is that the only reason why I don't know what you are thinking and what you are feeling is because I'm thinking about myself. But if I really thought about you, so if you have a child, if you have a little kid, you know what they're thinking. You know when they want a cookie, and and if you have a wife and she doesn't say one word, but she's angry, why do you have that sixth sense? Because you have ownership over this person, meaning you have accepted that person's success is your success, and that person's pain is your pain. So if you did that with more and more and more people, you would know, oh, you wake up in the morning, you know what? I think Jimmy doesn't have his rent paid. How do you know? How would you know these things? Because you think about him, because you care about him, because he's part of you, he's inside of you. And so what we're trying to do is trying to say that, so we had in the language of Kabbalah, which people won't understand, because it's not explained in today's language, we had the shattering of the vessels. And so what happened is, we said the story many times, is that we came to a party in the world of Ein Sof, and God gave us everything. And after a while, we said, we don't want to be at this party, because this party I'm just getting everything, and I'm not giving anything to God. I don't like the relationship. This is called the breaking of the vessels. We broke apart into individual souls, right? We separated from each other because we broke out of the house of God. We broke out of the unity. Why did we do that? Because we said, I don't want to get all this stuff for free anymore. I want to be me, and I want to work back to this place. So you leave your parents' house, you go out, you leave home, you go to the army, and then you go to the college, and you go to university, and you go out, you become a big doctor, and you come back to your parents as a 30-year-old, and you buy them dinner, and you invite them to your house, and so you're an adult now, right? So why did you leave the house? You could have just stayed in their house. They already had all the things that you went to go get because you wanted to do it yourself. So the way we do it ourselves is the shattering of the vessels, everything breaks apart. We end up in this lower material world, and now I have to do the work of feeling you again. I used to feel you for free. I used to get everything from you for free, meaning what happened to you happened to me, and there was a complete unity of our experience. We were all, at one point, in God's house, in the palace of God, and everything was free. And I loved you, you loved me. We had a swimming pool, and the kitchen was open, and everything was great. Why was it like that? It was because we were getting everything for free, and we didn't know that there was no lacking. There was nothing I needed. So I never fought with you. Why would I fight with you? You want to go swimming, I want to go swimming. You want to eat, I want to eat. So we have a complete, in a perfect life, and so there's no fighting. But what we have to do now is we have to go out. We came down to this material plane to feel our own individuality, our own selfishness, and now we have to decide step by step that we want to put this puzzle back together and come back together of our own free will. That's the whole story. Made sense? Yeah? Any questions? Because that was very fast, but the only reason why I went so fast is because we said it over and over again. We keep saying the same thing. Okay. It is impossible to attain spiritual states without going through states of hiddenness, darkness, and suffering that are preparations for experiencing the light. Okay? It is impossible to attain spiritual states without going through states of hiddenness, darkness, and suffering that are preparations of experiencing the light, okay? Very important. The Baal HaSulam says that going up is really going down, and going down is really going up in this world. In other words, in this world, when we have a hardship, that's really the point of our lives, and we're having good things, that's really just a preparation for having the bad things happen to us, the hard things. Let me give you a perfect example. You said, I really, really, really want to become an NFL player. I want to be in the NFL. I want to be a football player. You're in high school and you're watching games and you're eating popcorn and you're watching all the football games and you're saying, I really, 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 really want I want to play for the NFL. So you start practicing, and when you start to practice, you start to go through all these horrible experiences. You're running, you're throwing up from the running, you're hurting your shoulder, and all these things. You're putting yourself through all of these very hard experiences. But the hard experiences are not suffering, because you know that with each one of these things that happens to you, you're getting closer to your goal. And so suffering comes from the disconnection between what the goal of our lives is and what we're experiencing. So if I'm having something horrible happen to me, and I don't see any purpose for it, then it means excruciating pain. I'll give you an example of this. Let's say a person gets, you go to a, God forbid, somebody's in a concentration camp and they tattoo somebody. So there's horrible pain, and the whole entire experience is awful, that they're giving you a tattoo with a number on it, and from the physical pain, the emotional pain, everything is the most tragic, horrible thing, that you're going through this experience of somebody giving you a tattoo. But you know that in life, people go and get a tattoo of of something that's very meaningful to them, their girlfriend's name or something. And to them, even though it's painful, it's a beautiful act of enjoyment to get this tattoo. And so when we have an awareness of what we're gaining from going through hard experiences, then it can turn, first of all, it can become just painful instead of being suffering. And then there's an even higher level where we can actually enjoy the pain. We can actually enjoy so if you're jogging or you're going to the gym and you're lifting excruciatingly heavy weight and your arms are killing, you could actually be enjoying it because you're so aware that it's going to make your muscles bigger and you're going to look better on the beach, and you're so excited about that you look better, that the pain itself is something that you actually enjoy, right? So Obviously, we have to be careful when we think this way because we don't want to bring on any suffering or any pain to ourselves. We want to work in a very balanced way, and we want to work in a way that is the most appealing way to God, which means with the least pain. And that's our job. That's why Torah and mitzvos are such a beautiful gift. The Jewish people referred to the Torah as a gift from God. And so the gift is that if you have a blueprint and you have an awareness and you have gates and you have boundaries and you have a way of organizing your life and structuring your life, it's an ability to, first of all, understand what the goal is, but also to minimize the damage that you're going to do along the journey. And so that's why if a person is doesn't have an inner awareness of Torah and mitzvahs, it can become a very bland and very, very, not meaningless, but a very routine that is just, hey, I do these things because I was told to do them, and I'm hoping that I get a reward for them, but there's not really a deeper awareness. But if a person's doing the inner aspect of Torah, the spiritual work of Torah, then they're aware of what the goal is, and the goal is for them to become like God, which means powerful, honorable, with all your character traits are all corrected. You can trust yourself to be honest. You can trust yourself to be disciplined. You can trust yourself to be right. All the things, all the different names of the spheros. These are all things that you can trust yourself. You learn to, you correct. You become empowered on all these levels. I can be strict when I need to be strict, and I can be kind when I need to be kind, and I can be beautiful when I need to be beautiful, and I can be victorious when I need to be victorious. Right? That's what we're talking about. Correcting our zera anpin, our 7 emotional attributes, right? That I get angry when I'm supposed to get angry, and when I choose to be angry, I can be angry, and when I choose to be jealous, I can choose to be jealous. All of these things exist on the side of kedusha. There's an appropriate time to be jealous, and the Torah tells us that we should be jealous of righteous people, and put ourselves in a position where instead of being jealous of a rock star or be jealous of a movie star or of somebody who's made $1 billion on Wall Street, be jealous of people who are righteous and who have corrected themselves and who are altruistic and who behave in a way that is conducive to unity, right? So there's all of these, that's what we're doing in Torah and mitzvos. We're correcting all of these attributes. And then we go onto the 3 highest attributes, right, which are called gar, right, chachma bina das, the intellectual attributes. So we have 3 in the tree of life. There's 3 intellectual attributes that we correct, chachma bina das, and then we have 7 emotional attributes that we correct. We work on all these things, right? Very good. I heard it from a Chabad rabbi yesterday that I think he was learning Tanya, and he said that the outside of the mitzvah corrects the 7 emotional attributes, and the kavana, the inner, our intention while doing the mitzvah, corrects the 3 higher attributes, chachma bina das. So it's a very nice way of thinking about it. That you do the inside of the mitzvah and you do the outside of the mitzvah, and they both correspond to different worlds of consciousness, right? They say about the Ari, we live in Tzfat, and they say about the Ari, he would walk down the street here in Tzfat, and he would see somebody and he'd say, you need to be a bit more careful washing your hands in the morning. You see somebody else, you need to be a little bit more careful about, making sure that all the doors in your house have a mezuzah. You have to be more careful about, make sure you have 2 really nice chalot on Shabbat. What was he saying? So he's able to see somebody and immediately see their attributes, right? So if I see somebody, wow, that guy's really jealous. Oh, that guy gets angry quickly. Oh, that guy, it's not so hard to do, right? We can all do that. And so the Ari HaKodesh, who's buried here in Tzfat, he understood the root of each of the mitzvot. He understood, and I don't know anything about this, but I'm saying, I'll give it like a fake example. It's like, these challahs that we eat on Shabbat morning are connected to jealousy when it comes to finance. So he has this mental map of all of these, of the spiritual worlds of consciousness, and he's able to say that this mitzvah, because of the letters and because of what wheat is and what this baking is, all these different things that are manifest on the physical plane of existence that we can barely understand, we do a good job with this on Sukkot with the lulav and etrog. We explain, the lulav is the spine and the Adasim are I think the lips, right? So we do a good end, and we say this one stands for speaking properly, and this one stands, right? So we do it sometimes, but we don't do it as much as the Kabbalists did it, and how much, so the Ari was able to say to somebody, hey, spend a little bit more money on your etrog this year. Understanding that would at least fix the attributes, the emotional attributes of the person. And then the person would have to then obviously circle back around and understand what the inner aspects of these things mean and how to understand them logically, right? So we have to do both this work. We know people who gravitate towards, we're in Sfat, so people gravitate towards the inner work, and they're very interested in the inner Kabbalistic meaning of everything, but they're not as focused on the exterior aspects. We go to other communities where they don't talk about anything about your emotions or spiritual things, but they do tell you, the lulav has to be this big, and the etrog has to be this shape, and then they're very, very busy with the things, and so we shouldn't judge other people because everybody works where they feel that their heart takes them. And so if a person wants to focus on the exterior, and you say, well, what about your interior? Guess what? That's for you. We're all one soul. So if you're doing more interior and you love every other Jew, you'll hopefully find a Jew who says, hey, you're better at the inside, I'm better at the outside. Maybe we should go into business together. We should be partners. We should go to the same shul. We should help each other. We should be neighbors, right? That's the Lubavitch Rebbe says that somewhere, something like this, somewhere in the world there might be a Jew who's doing a mitzvah that only he can do. So there might be a Jew. So like we're in Israel and there's certain mitzvot with the planting, with the fields that they can't do in outside of Israel. They don't apply, right? And so we should know. They always have this in movies where you meet somebody and then you don't realize who they are and you find out who they are later. I just watched the movie Ford versus Ferrari, about the fight between Ferrari and Ford, and they went to the race. And so the guy goes in there and he insults this guy only to find out 20 minutes later that that's the head of the company that he's going to meet, right? So we all have experience. And so if you imagine you're running to get out of this terrible situation and you're going to this boat and you fight with somebody, you're pushing with somebody to get onto the boat and you curse him out and you give him an elbow, and then when you get on the boat you find out this is the guy who's in charge of the food, the kitchen on the boat, right? So if we want to think Kabbalistically and think holistically and think Mashiach consciousness, when you meet somebody who you really, really don't agree with, that's somebody who has a quality that you don't possess. So if this person is very stingy, he might be a very good accountant. And if you have a business, you might need an accountant like that. And if you meet a person who's very, very, very forgiving, that guy might be somebody who gives out things then when you don't deserve it. You might, let's say, everybody got a sandwich because they worked all day, but you had your leg was hurting and you sat out all day and the guy gives you a sandwich anyway. So that's the way we should think. Think from the outside in and the inside out. So how do we unify? We unify by realizing that every single soul has a unique quality that we will need at some point, and that we should really be nice to them because what they can give us is a lot greater than what we can, than our offense. Okay, very good. Are we done?
The last what you
Okay,
said
but thank you.
is like that's,
What's that?
That's meaning what you just said is like that you have to trust Hashem completely.
Exactly. The reason why we have people, the reason why we experience people is because we can't experience God without people, because God is unified. So imagine we had a world where you were supposed to become a car mechanic, but there's only the whole car. So you saw the car you drove the car all the time, but you only had a whole car. So you would have a very hard time at becoming a mechanic, because you would have the whole and you wouldn't have the pieces. And so we have pieces. And so in order to understand God, we need all of the pieces, right? We have to take the car apart and fix the carburetor and fix the pistons and fix all the bearings, right? We have to do that, all the tubes. So the work is to realize that we can, by correcting our perception of everybody around us, we can reveal godliness by putting the pieces back together. So we are presented with imagine you drove a car, and you really got interested in the car, and then your father took you and he took you to a garage, and you came there and there was all the pieces of the car were all taken apart. Mm-hmm. And your father said, okay, now figure it out, put it back together. Yeah. That's what we're doing. That's the work we're doing. So we put all the people back together, we create a unified soul, and that soul becomes a mirror, that wholeness becomes a mirror by which to experience God's wholeness. That's how it works.
It would be easier if you have how you say it, your mission in life. How do you say it in Hebrew? I can't think of the name.
Tikkun?
Tikkun.
Okay.
If you had it like we have the Torah, that's the instruction, and then if you have the Tikkun for your life.
You had a personal instruction of
Yeah,
what you had to
exactly.
do.
That would be, then you would
Amazing. So one of the students here, one of our star pupils here, is saying that if we had the instructions of what our tikkun was, what we were meant to fix in life, it would be a lot easier. So here is the secret. You see, Kabbalah there's many, many secrets. And one of the secrets is that God is waiting for you to do something to tell you what your tikkun is. And so that's why when people daven, they say, please Hashem, guide me, direct me. That's why people go to Rebbes. People have a Rebbe and they go to the Rebbe and they ask the Rebbe, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? Exactly, what's my life mission? The Rebbe was very, very big about this, about trying to coax a person forward to finding out what it is that they're supposed to do that no one else in the world could do. And the Rebbe told many people to do something, and the person turned around and said to the Lubavitch Rebbe, why don't you do it? You're smarter than me. And he goes, no, only you could do this thing. I need you to do this thing. This is what you need to do. And no one else could do it but you. And so the more you understand that God is waiting for you, there's 50 gates. A gate is a closed door. And so each time you have one of these feelings, that's a closed door that you need to do something to open. And you should spend your time figuring out, how do I open this door? People spend time, I remember in my business, I would do all the things that I was good at and none of the things that I was bad at. And in the end of the day, those things that I wasn't good at are the things that hurt me. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out where the place of the work. So Rav Baruch Shalom Ashlag, this was one of his catchphrases. He goes, where is the place of the work? Someone could wake up in the morning and spend all of their time learning and none of their time praying, when they were created just to pray. And somebody could spend all their time doing one thing when they were really, so what we should do is say, a very good rule of thumb, and this is something that you hear all the time with gurus and self-help people, is get up in the morning and say to yourself, what don't I want to do? And those are the things that you should do, right? So if you're wondering what it is that you need to do, figure out what you don't want to do, and that's exactly what you should be doing. Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody.